Well, the moment that we've all been waiting for, yes, indeed, we now bring to you this very spectacular launch right here, a net zero portal to track, to monitor, and to maintain momentum of top Indian companies contributing to a healthy environment. And joining us to do the honors is none other than Mr. Naveen Munjal, Managing Director, Hero Electric Vehicles Private Limited. And in this very, very interesting conversation, joining us is Ms. Namrata Rana, Director, Strategy and Brand, Futurescape, India Ambassador of University of Cambridge Institute for Sustainability Leadership. Also adding on to what all this very interesting portal is going to bring for all of us right here. Over to both of you.
Thank you so very much, Isha. It's my pleasure to be here today with all of you. Hi, am I audible to everybody?
Yes, please. We'd love to hear from you. Please do set the tone for what the Net Zero portal will bring.
Thank you so much. So it's my pleasure to be here today, and what's really critical for all of us to reach our net zero targets is to monitor every single thing that we do in this endeavor. What it means is that we need to measure and monitor the emissions, the scope 1 emissions, the scope 2 emissions, and the scope 3 emissions. More than that, we also need to redefine our products and services and look at them really deeply. This entire transformation is a transformation of people, it's a transformation of technology, it's a transformation of innovation. Every single thing around the way we make things, grow things, is going to change because of this transformation, because it's an energy transformation which has cross-cutting impacts on everybody else and everything else all around us. So the biggest change from the great industrial revolution to now is here. And the net zero portal is actually going to be looking at capturing all this transformation. The net zero portal is a collaboration between Futurescape and Economic Times. It has the top companies and their emissions that are captured in, but it also has a very important aspect of the transition, which is by what time they're going to reach net zero. So by what are their commitments, by when they're going to achieve it. And with me here is Mr. Naveen Munjal, and I would like to invite him to actually launch the portal for us.
Thank you, Namrata. Thank you. It's an absolute pleasure being here today, and I look forward to a great interaction ahead. It's a great initiative that you guys are taking. This is a phenomenal initiative and much required for now, for in the times that we have right now. So looking forward to it and happy to be here today. Thank you.
If we can have the video, please. Thank you so much. Naveen, as you can see, there are so many organizations that are looking at net zero targets. And in fact, there's been a cascade of commitments, especially during and before the COP summit. And you were there to see the transformation there at the summit itself. What is your take on the way the net zero transition is emerging?
Thank you, Namrata. When we look at it from a corporate standpoint, and this is not just India, but at a global standpoint, we now, corporates, companies, manufacturing companies, service companies, etc., we all really need to pitch in now in order to reach that goal of net zero summit, of reaching net zero. Now, different countries have different goals. India has set itself a goal of 2070. Now, when we start working backwards from there, there is a lot of work which is required to be done immediately. And when we look at our urban centers, A large part of the climate change that is happening, a large part of the pollution that's happening, it relates to automotive pollution. So we do need to start steering towards a cleaner form of mobility when it comes down to that. Not just that, when we look at our greenhouse gases that we're emitting, whether it is our plants or offices or homes or whatever be the case, we really need to be conscious of what we're doing and how we start to reduce the greenhouse emissions that we've got there. So we really need to start using technology in a much more effective fashion. And this is something which is happening across the world. So it's not just India that we're looking at, but across the world, there is a huge amount of shift which is beginning to happen from a corporate standpoint. ESGs is a very, very important factor when it comes down to corporates. And also now when we look at funding, and when you look at companies going for IPOs, etc., the market itself is rewarding those companies which are coming in with a cleaner outlook rather than what it was earlier.
How does one help organizations make decisions, Naveen? Because the transformation of the fleet is critical. So for all the organizations that are saying that, our net zero targets are X, Y, and Z, which is either 2030, 2040, 2050, doesn't really matter materially unless they start making the change now, which means, picking up the small things that they can actually transform, which is transforming their fleet, and incentivizing their employees to change. But when you talk to the HR managers, when you talk to the administration heads, it's not something on their horizon. All this is somewhere under the guise of, the fact that ESG or sustainability is not their responsibility. What is your thoughts on?
Namrata, you're right on that. There is a very large layer which is there, which doesn't really, believe, no, I wouldn't say believe, but, they don't really know how to go about the change that is required. But when it gets drilled from the top, to say that, we have to, this is our goal and this is where we have to go. And that is something, a message which gets passed down in the organization, then people really start believing it. So it's not just about lip service here. It's actually about enacting it, living it day in and day out. So let me tell you about our company. So we've been living, eating, breathing electric since the past over a decade now. So we believe tremendously in this whole movement towards electrification when it comes to mobility. Now, when you look at it there is, of course, an environmental impact which is there, but what they begin to understand, what a lot of companies and people have begun to understand, is the importance, actually, because economically also it actually makes sense. It's begun to make sense now. So we've got strong policies at a country level which are propelling electric mobility forward from an automotive standpoint. And besides the policies, there are central policies, there are state policies also which are pushing it through. Now, these are important factors when you look at it from an economic standpoint. So you're saving on your pocket while doing a bit for the environment. So there's two ways to look at it. In a lot of cases, when you look at it from a consumer perspective, we actually explain the economic benefits to him. And the benefits are tremendous. So the initial purchase price has come down dramatically. The total cost of ownership gap between IC engine and electric has widened hugely in favor of electric. And besides all of that, you're actually saving money. And you're doing a bit for the environment. But when you look at it from a corporate perspective, there the consideration is more that you're doing a bit for the environment, you're contributing towards the environment, and with all of that, there is an economic saving also that is happening, which is a very important one. So that is so depending on which way you look at it, economic saving and environmental saving are both going hand in hand here.
And when I speak to a lot of organizations, they seem to say that while transportation is something very critical, and how employees travel to and fro, that is important, and they can cut down emissions. Somehow nobody actually seems to talk about the fact that transporting goods from one place to the other also needs decarbonization. So it's not just how we travel, it's how our goods travel. And that is, to my mind, some extent, we've not really thought about it. And that also means that all the startups that are using two-wheelers to deliver the services that they look at. So, valuations of companies, and there are many companies that have gone for IPO, they're looking at IPOs, or they are valued at a certain level. But The issue with them is that seems to be measuring, at least to my knowledge, seems to be measuring the carbon footprint at the moment. They're really talking about the fact that your revenues have gone up so much, but to achieve those revenues, your carbon footprint is also increasing at an exponential level.
You're right in a way. I mean, I think a lot of companies, a lot of corporates don't even know how to measure it actually. They don't know where to start. So this is a relatively a new concept when you look at it from an Indian perspective. This is something, at least in the West, when you look at even packaging or when you buy a computer and it says, what is the carbon footprint? A number of companies have been doing it, whether it's Apple or HP or some of the numerous of these companies on what is the carbon footprint in manufacturing those and what is the recyclability, etc. of that product. It's something which a concept which is just beginning to catch. It's caught on in India to an extent, but not proliferated down to a much deeper level. So it's still at a very high level stage in terms of what the how people actually understand it. So I think there needs to be a level of understanding on how this is going to be utilized. How do you actually calculate? How do you actually measure how much water I'm consuming and how that water is getting treated? This has always been there in our manufacturing. STB plants have been always there. But what is the impact of the manufacturing that I'm doing, which is not relating to emissions, is an important one. So companies are beginning to realize it. Companies are realizing it also from a standpoint that if they have to go in for IPOs, if they have to go in for a fundraisers, etc., those are all going to be very, very important factors. And the markets are going to reward the ones who are going down that route and penalize the ones who don't. So these are going to be extremely important factors. That said, we find that even within our conversation with numerous corporates in the delivery segment, for example, they are beginning, and this is in the last number of years, I'm seeing a tremendous shift or a change which is happening where companies are willing to adopt more and more electric mobility. Of course, there are still gaps which need to be bridged. When you look at it from a commercial standpoint, the larger vehicles, how do you convert those to cleaner fuels or zero emission fuels? There is still a lot of work to be done there. But at least in the smaller vehicles, in the last mile connectivity, those vehicles can be converted much quicker. We are on a path. Are we moving fast enough at this point? Not really. I would say there is still a lot of room to move faster. But nevertheless, we are on a path which seems to be a very interesting path and in the right direction.
But there are many naysayers on this. They say that electric mobility is not going to solve the problems. They keep talking about the fact that batteries can't be recycled. The electricity that you actually use for electric transport could be coming from coal. So what's the point of it all? Then they keep talking about the fact that what about the recyclability and end of life of these electric vehicles? So at one level, there is this totally activist kind of a perspective saying that no, this is not the way that we actually should be doing it. Perhaps there is a better way of it. Then there are organizations like you who are saying that there is transformation to be had, and then there are many others who are talking about the fact that electricity is not the way to go. Hydrogen is the way to go. So at every level, there is what should I say? There are no clear answers. There are many things that are being discussed. And do you think there is merit to all these arguments?
Namrata, if we keep on waiting for perfect technology to come by, we're going to be waiting all our lives. That's never going to happen, right? You have to start somewhere. If we wait for the perfect product to come by, if we wait for the perfect car to come by, that's never really going to happen because this is evolution. This is something where we are going to continuously evolving in an evolving process. That said, should we stop innovation right now and wait for the next real big thing to happen? That's not the way to go. So right now, the best answer for us is actually to go with electric mobility. That is zero emission right now. Of course, that will transition into something like a hydrogen fuel cell at a later date. But right now, do we really have the power? Do we really have the water? Do we really have the resources to actually produce that level of hydrogen, whether it is green or blue, to power all the vehicles that we have? And will it drill down? The technology is still evolving. Will it drill down to lighter vehicles? In a country like India, where 80% of the vehicles are actually two-wheelers, these are light vehicles. It's the technology for that to go down the hydrogen route is extremely far off. It's not even, I'm not even talking about the next decade. I'm talking about the next 20 to 30 years away. So what happens till in the meantime, in the interim? The best answer for that is right now to move towards electrification and then graduate. It's the same way as, saying my mobile phone, why is it not much smaller, much more powerful, much more this thing? This is evolution. The computers have evolved over a period of time. Batteries have evolved over a period of time. We were earlier on lead acid batteries. We're now on lithium ion batteries. And within lithium also, we've come to a stage where there is, of course, when you're talking about recyclability, for example, it's not just that these batteries are going to be dumped once they're done with electric vehicles. What's going to happen is these would be refurbished to be used in maybe stationary applications once they're done with mobility. And from stationary applications, they're going to go into recycling. And even with recycling, because the materials that go in, the cobalt, the nickel, the lithium, etc., are so expensive, they're not going to be thrown away. They will be extracted and more batteries are going to be made, which may only go for stationary applications, which is going to be a huge need for us as we go towards a 500 gigawatt hour capacity going forward. We are going to need storage capacities because India is a country where we are going to rely a lot on solar. So when you actually produce that energy, you're going to have to store it for usage in the evening. So when thermal power plants begin to shut down at some point of time, then how are we storing all that energy? You find in Scandinavian countries, for example, which are producing a large part of renewable energy using wind as the source, they have challenges of storing that energy to be able to use it the next day. And we're going to face the same thing here. So you're going to have to store that energy in some shape or form, and then that energy is going to be deployed in the following day, or for whatever be the case. So we have to start somewhere. I would not I would say you've got to take that first step, and then that first step is going to lead to the second and thereafter. So right now is the time where we are moving into a space where electrification has already begun. The government is pushing it. We've got our goal set by the Prime Minister to say that 2070 is a net zero goal, which is a fantastic goal. When we now have to start working backwards from it. When we start working backwards, we find that automotive, we've actually got to be acting now. If we wait for that right product, hydrogen, to become commercially viable, then we're just going to be waiting. I get asked, questions about why are we going into autonomous driving and why not straight into private, flying cars and everything. You will get there, but first you have to take that first step. No, you have to go from driverless to driverless cars, and then you will go into those directions.
Absolutely. And there are many sectors that have actually seen gradual evolution in our lifetimes. So, say the telecom revolution, we went from 2G to 3G, 4G, and now we're talking about 5G in many parts of the world. So, while technology is ever evolving, there are many things that are going on. I also feel that the net zero revolution is a revolution around innovation. Nothing that we have at the moment is perfect, and it's not going to solve all our problems, but we will be able to solve our problems in parts, and that incremental innovation will take us. There may be some parts of disruptive innovation that are likely to happen, but there will be incremental innovation across the board in many aspects that will take us there. uh, in one of my conversations you mentioned R&D, and I wanted to understand, where do you think the biggest innovations are going to come from, particularly in the Indian context? So while globally there may be many things, there are things that we need in India in our own context, and that we will be able to adopt and scale, because ultimately innovation is only as good as the scale that it achieves. Any thoughts on that, Naveen?
See, when you look at the Indian context, where we are highly dependent on oil and coal as being our main power sources, oil for automotive and for other sectors, and coal for our power generation. And coal is a very cheap form of power generation, and we've built our power plants, and these power plants are built to last decades. The life of a power plant is a minimum of 40 odd years. And some of them have come up not too distant past. So when we have to transition from there into completely clean energy, then what happens to the investments which have been done? And is that energy that we're going to produce, is that the storage devices? is we cannot increase cost. People wouldn't accept that. Suddenly if you give an option to somebody to say that, okay, fine, you're moving to green energy, but you're going to be paying 25 or 50% more than what you were earlier paying, there would be very few takers for it. Only people who really believe in it would actually go. Masses would not go down that route. And that's something that we find even in automotive. So electric vehicles, as they become cheaper because of the subsidies that are being given by the government, suddenly the market is exploding. India is a highly price sensitive market. It's a price sensitive market to initially purchase. It's a price sensitive market when you have to run whatever it is that you're running, whether it is vehicles or you're buying energy power sources, etc. So innovations will have to come in energy storage. That's going to be a very, very important one. The second is that a loss of distribution, the energy loss that is done while distributing energy across the country is substantial at this point of time. So there will have to be resources, there will have to be better ways of distributing that energy. We will, as you were talking about the hydrogen fuel cell, we will have to come up with ways where we can produce hydrogen at a much lower cost and then distribute it, because we certainly don't have the pipelines to distribute it. So how are we really going to distribute it? So we need to create that infrastructure, and that creation of infrastructure is going to take us a long time to do. Besides that, another factor which we have to do right now and which is there immediately is infrastructure for electric mobility, for example. At this point of time, our infrastructure for electric mobility is extremely sparse. We need to have a much denser infrastructure if we are to really push this sector through. And when we look at electric mobility also, you've got to look at the different infrastructure for two-wheelers, different for three-wheelers, cars, public transport, and commercial vehicles. All have different needs and requirements when it comes to the infrastructure. All will take off at a different stage at a different time, and then they will transition into a different stage. So what we expect happening is that, commercial vehicles, for example, they will probably move to things like hydrogen fuel cell much faster than other forms of mobility. Ships will move to much faster. Marine transport will move to those kind of devices, those kind of energy propulsions much faster than any other forms of this thing. And probably down in that whole value chain or in that conversion will be two-wheelers, simply because the cost of converting that, having a hydrogen-powered engine there in a vehicle, is going to be extremely expensive for a two-wheeler. So there is going to be a transition which happens. It's going to start from electric in the smaller forms. Hydrogen is probably going to start from the larger formats and drill down to the smaller formats. That's how I see technology happening, transitioning. And energy storage, like I said, is going to be, and making our solar panels, for example, making them far more efficient. How do you make our windmills far more efficient to produce more energy than what they are producing right now? So those innovations are going to continue happening.
And these are likely to have a big impact on the jobs in the sector as well, right? So from what I can understand, there is going to be a huge shift in terms of skills that are going to be needed to actually enable this, because fuel by its very nature impacts the way that products are made, the way products are serviced, and what happens to them in terms of end of life. Some thoughts, Naveen, on the kind of policy changes that you need, or the policy impetus that your organization and the sector itself needs, would be interesting to hear.
See, one thing is very clear, that we are on a path which is moving towards electrification, which is moving towards zero emissions. Now, the point is, there are still, I wouldn't say gaps, but there are still some asks with us which are there. Now, some of them are to do with, if we look at the policies, clearly the policies all have to be unidirectional, which means that all of them are focused on one agenda to get to that stage. That is the need of the hour from a climate standpoint, and that is the need of the hour from an environmental standpoint. If you look at AQI levels in North India, in the NCR region, we are, just smogged in at this point of time. And if you see your AQI readings, it is extreme to severe. That's the kind of environment we're living in. So
We
we
get
really
happy
need
when
to.
the air quality is poor. That's what the papers are reporting, and they're very delighted about the fact we have poor AQ.
Absolutely. So our parameters, our benchmarks are going completely haywire right now. So the point is that we need to have strong policies which are pushing us in that direction. We've, like I said, we've got a goal in place, which is the end goal. Now, to get to that end goal, you've got to break it up into smaller goals, and those smaller goals could be different for different forms of vehicles. Now, when we look at two wheelers, for example, while we there are figures out there, that we may be 80% converted to electric by 2030 or whatever. I believe that, if we look at a goal, which is, let's say, even 2027, where we talk about all new vehicles to be sold up to a certain capacity, of course, to be sold, which are of zero emission vehicles, then that sets a goal in place. Then you start working backwards from there. Then you start working, the infrastructure begins to fall in place, the manufacturing systems fall in place, distribution, etc., fall in place. So policies need to be unidirectional, and policies need to be inclusive. You need to make them as wide, to you create a wide footprint. And that is a very, very important one. And then beyond that, of course, is, again, having deadlines in place by which time you need to convert. Awareness is a very important factor. Financing is a very, very important factor in this, for this sector. Awareness could come out of things like Swachh Bharat program, for example. When we talk about pollution outside, we should talk about air pollution as well. Mandating is a very important
Yeah,
factor.
I've always wondered, why did Swachh Bharat not look at air pollution? The thing that impacts all of us, right? So Swachh Bharat has to, in my view, evolve in itself to actually take that concept also into consideration. But behavior change, Naveen, is not that easy or not that difficult. I mean, we talk about it every year. We talk about the air pollution problem, and people talk about shifting homes, and in the end, they just buy one more air purifier, right? Rather than that, they should be buying one more electric vehicle or traveling less. Do you see any parallels in any other part of the world that we can learn from?
See, different parts of the world have applied different regulations and rules. If you look at our neighbor China, there was a carrot and a stick approach. So, I mean, they restricted the sale of IC engine vehicles. They created an infrastructure and they subsidized the electric mobility. Europe created a huge infrastructure and subsidized electric vehicles. Similarly, different countries have followed different rules. Now, clearly, in our country, we're not looking at the stick approach, but certainly there is a carrot there, and the stick actually comes in the form of the high fuel prices, which makes it more expensive for people to run IC engine vehicles. So India is unique in that sense, where we're looking at price sensitivity. We're looking at products which are at the same price or lower than the IC engine counterparts, and yet perform almost as good as them. But in terms of the economics, are far lower in terms of the economics. So that is a unique scenario. So if you look at the West, for example, their electric mobility is far more expensive than IC engine vehicles, simply because, I mean, there's a premium which is given for electric mobility. In India, it's the other way around. So we are now, in terms of our pricing, of course, the government's helping there because of the subsidies. Pricing is lower than that of IC engine vehicles, and which is a very, very important factor. So I think India will have a unique position on its own. And India also has an opportunity here, because of our strong base, because of the strong policy and push that we've got, to actually take on leadership position going forward. We are late starters, there's no doubt about that, but we could catch up pretty quickly, provided we get our policies completely moving in one direction.
I was listening to Mr. Puneet Dalmia earlier in this session, and he talked about the fact that India gave zero to the world. There is absolutely no reason why India cannot be a net zero country. Also, because of the fact that there are many aspects around sustainability that are already in the Indian ethos that we seem to have forgotten. The recycling things, having using things till their end of life, not really wasting too much. These are all aspects that Indian consumers and large parts of our country still follow, but many others seem to have forgotten. And I think the Net Zero's platform that we have launched as part of this summit is really an attempt to get organizations to disclose their targets, and also we will be following that through with looking at how these organizations launch products and services to actually support their targets, and develop how we can develop a platform and an ecosystem for organizational change, as well as involving many more people along this journey. And I'm really thankful to you, Naveen, for coming here, having the time to speak to us. And I could be speaking to you for another half an hour more, because there is so much to discuss in this space. Thank you, Economic Times. Thank you, Naveen, for allowing us to actually take this initiative. Thank you once again.
Thank you, Namrata. Thank you. Pleasure being here. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Naveen Munjal, for doing the honors and for bringing to life the Net Zero portal right here. Thank you so very much, Ms. Namrata Rana. You very rightly mentioned that this conversation can go on for hours because there's so much knowledge sharing happening right here. And that is exactly what we'd like to encourage all the companies participating to do. Yes, the Net Zero portal launch has made it possible for more and more companies to come on board, keep the net zero mission in mind, commit to curtailing global warming. And this portal really is going to help us identify the senior leaders, their contributions towards transforming to a 1.5-degree world. I'd like to invite more and more companies to please join hands, come on board, be a part of this change that we are trying to bring forth. And please do disclose your net zero targets. And we're going to follow up on that. So here is our open invitation to please join in and contribute in every way possible. Thank you for making this such a spectacular Net Zero portal launch, both Mr. Munjal and Ms. Rana. It was a pleasure having the two of you here. And at this point, let me once again request all our delegates to please participate in our survey. It is thanks to all of you, the views that you will be sharing, that we'll get to know so much more about what you're thinking, what you think about the various sessions that we've brought for you. And let me now take a moment and thank our partners for their trust in us, our presenting partner, GE, our co-powered by partner, Skoda Volkswagen, our principal knowledge advisor, Ernst & Young, our industry partners, Hero Electric, Bayer, IBM, AWS. Let me also thank our sustainable technology partner, Capgemini, our knowledge partner, Futurescape. You just heard Ms. Rana tell us so much more. May I also thank our supporting associations, Labs Indigram Association for promoting sustainability in campuses and communities, and of course our media partner, Sustainability Next. The summit has been brought to you by ET Edge Unwired, and we have so much more happening right here. Up next is going to be a spectacular session, and we'll be joined by our guest of honor for our address on India transforming to a net zero emissions energy system. All that and more on the other side, so please do stay tuned.